Okay, this is a model to help you get through your quote analysis graphic organizer. A quote analysis is an explanation of some specific text that came directly from a novel, a nonfiction text, a magazine, any type of reading. In this example, you were told to select a quote that could have been dialogue or it could have been paraphrased language that the author created. My example comes from James McPherson's Crossroads of Freedom, Antietam, or Antietam, Crossroads of Freedom, and it's about the Battle of Antietam. And the section that I chose is actually leading up to the battle itself. So, in this first part of this video, you are to write your quote, and you will write that in this cell underneath where it says write the quote here. Underneath questions, you are to list 3 to 5 questions that will help you write well about the quote. And that was a challenge for me too, but it became easier once I had chosen my quote. And so, for example, here's my quote. These were dark, dismal days in the North, perhaps the darkest of many such days during the war. And so I quoted that, and then I put in taken from James McPherson's Antietam, Crossroads of Freedom, and I also need to cite the page, and that is page 85. So your graphic organizer should look like this, okay? Same structure. Now that's my quote, and so my 3 to 5 questions look like this. Why do I think this quote is important? What do I think it means? Why were the days dark? How does it connect to the Battle of Antietam? And what does it tell me about the battle the days before or after it? And so I made those questions after I had my quote, and so your questions are going to be specific to your quote itself. I don't have a generic list of questions that you can use, okay, but you can use mine as a guide. So in the next section, it says, use the questions to help you write about the quote here. This will probably be the longest of this half of the graphic organizer. And you can say that you see that I answered a little bit of each question. This quote is important because it shows how events leading up to the Battle of Antietam went so badly for the Union. Okay? They lost nearly every meaningful battle in the East, and after the Battle of Second Bull Run, it looked like Washington, D.C., the capital, could fall to the Confederates. Okay, so in that instance, I've led why it was so dark. So now let's see what if I answered this last question. The statement reveals the level of desperation in the North. There was a lack of hope amongst the citizens of the Union. Clearly, the North needed to win the next major battle quite badly, and that major battle turned out to be Antietam. So what does it tell me about the battle, days before or after it? So right here, it tells me lack of hope. It told me that the North needed to win the battle. So really, all of my writing here is based off of my questions that I generated. Okay, so that is phase 1 of your graphic organizer. Stay tuned for phase 2. Okay, the next step is phase 2, and this takes you from the literal to the deeper meaning. And so the first box on phase 2 says, what does it say, or what it says, and that's the quote. And so all I did was I literally translated what the quote means, and I said McPherson's quote shows that the general feeling towards the Civil War in the North was one of hopelessness and despair. A very little of inference in there. It was pretty straightforward because I took that from the darkest of many such days. That's pretty obvious to me. The second part is what it means. This is where you actually translate that into the larger context. So it's going to require a bit more thinking and a bit more digging into the context of your text. And so I wrote, the quote reveals how awful the Union had been fighting the war for the first 2 years. It could hardly get any worse unless the rebels gained their independence. So 2 sentences, but those sentences really reveal what the significance of that quote is. The final part is the explanation, and the explanation, as you can see, it's going to take a little bit more time to explain exactly what that quote means in the full context with a deeper explanation. So I wrote, the days and months leading up to the climactic Battle of Antietam were desperate for the North and its people. Having been embarrassed again at the Battle of Second Bull Run, and Washington, D.C. under direct threat by the rebels, a sense of doom was obvious. It seemed that any time Robert E. Lee and his army would enter Washington, end the war, and become an independent country. The North was struggling to find hope, as there seemed to be none. Now it was up to what could possibly be the very last battle of the war, and as the North and South converged on each other in western Maryland, this battle could very well be the deciding factor. It all could come down to this, much like the 12th round does for two heavyweight boxers. So what I've done is I've expanded my answer. I've given some background that I wouldn't have known had I not read my text, and I show that I really understand the meaning of that quote. Because really that's what you're being assessed on. You're being assessed on not only can you pick an appropriate quote, but can you explain it? Can you expand on it? Can you show comprehension of what this quote means in the context of your text? So that's where you're headed.